The circumference of a circle is the distance around the outside of a circle. So as we keep drawing round the circle, it's that distance that we travelled. Often you might think as if you're going round a circle, it's like going round as though we have the letter C, and C is for circumference. So the circumference will be given as a length. Now to find the circumference of a circle, first of all you have to work out the distance across the circle. So this is the circumference of the circle. We take the centre of the circle here and we go from the top to the bottom, or just directly across the circle. That's the distance that we need to find. So if we think of this, the distance across, that might make ourselves into a D, and that's called the diameter of the circle. And basically the circumference of the circle is just a little bit more than 3 times longer than the diameter of the circle. And the actual formula says that the circumference is actually about 3.14 times the diameter. Now this number 3.14 has got a special name. It's called pi, and it is given this Greek symbol, which is the letter P in Greek, and it's called pi. So the circumference is pi times the diameter. If we look at this example, if we're trying to find the circumference, what we will need to do is we will need to use the formula. So the circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. So the circumference is pi, and you can either use 3.14 or you can use the pi button on your calculator, and the diameter is the distance across the shape. So the distance across this shape is 8 centimetres. And so if we calculate that, we'll come up with a great long decimal, 25.1327, etc. And roughly that to 1 decimal place will be 25.1 centimetres. That's to 1 decimal place. In this second example, we're trying to find the circumference, but we've been given the radius. The radius is the distance from the centre of the circle to the edge. And sometimes people remember radius by this little diagram, from the centre of the circle to the edge, and think of that as a little R. So this time we found the radius, so before working out the circumference we have to work out the distance all the way across, so we're going to have to double the radius. So the diameter we need to be able to find to work out the circumference, and we need to do 2 times the radius to be able to do that. Okay, so let's go. The circumference is going to be pi times the diameter, or we could say it's pi times 2 times the radius. So in this case it's pi times 2 times 6, or pi times 12, and that gives us 37.699, or if we're rounding off to 2 decimal places, to 1 decimal place, it could be 37.6. However, we need to check for rounding by looking at the very next number. If the very next number is a 5 or above, then it means that the actual answer will be rounded up. So because that's a 9, it means it'll be approximately 37.7 centimetres. That's to 1 decimal place. Now if we're going to work out the area of a circle, the formula is pi times the radius squared. So it's often seen as the area is equal to pi times the radius squared. So to work out the area of a circle, you need to know the distance from the centre of the circle to the edge. That's the radius, and you think of it as a little r like that. That's our radius. In this example then, we want to find the area. It's pi, so we can either use 3.14 or we can use the pi button in our calculator, and it's the radius squared, which means the radius times itself. The distance from the centre to the edge of this circle is the radius. We've been given that number, so it'll be times 3 times 3, or we could write it alternatively as pi times radius squared. So both of those calculations are equivalent, and if you work it out, you'll come up with 28.2743, etc. Let's now round that off to 1 decimal place. So to 1 decimal place, basically looking at 28.2. Let's check the next number. The next number is a 5 or above. That means we're going to round up. So the approximate area of this circle is 28.3, and the units are centimetre squares because we're talking about area. In this example, if we're trying to find the area is pi times the radius squared. In this case, we've been given the distance from across the circle, we've been given the diameter. So before we can use the formula, we need to work out what the radius is. The radius is half of the diameter, so it will be 10 divided by 2, and so our radius will be 5 centimetres. Now we can substitute into our formula. Area equals pi times the radius squared, or the radius times the radius, so we can do 5 times 5, or we could do 3.14, or pi times the radius squared. That will give us an answer of 78.5398, etc. If we round to one decimal place, basically we've got 78.5. Let's just check the next number to see if we need to round up. That's a 3. Because it's a 3, we don't need to round up. So our final answer will be 78.5 centimetres squared. Finally, we want to try and look at maybe why the formula works. If we can make things into rectangles or squares, then we can find the area easily by just doing the length times the width. So if we have a circle, it's a bit like, if we have the radius here, it's kind of like cutting it up into 4 equal squares, but it's not quite 4 squares, is it? Okay, because the area of those parts misses out these pieces. So we haven't exactly got 4 times the area of one of these blocks. We've probably got 3 and a bit times the area. So 3 and a bit of these areas here. Okay, so the area of this circle will probably be about 3 and a bit of those squares that we have here. And in fact, 3 and a bit is exactly 3.14, which is pi. And the area of one of these squares is found by doing its length times its width. Its length is the radius of the circle, and its width is the radius of the circle. So it's 3.14 times the radius, or as we know the formula, is the area equals pi times the radius squared.